Efed podcast, the podcast exploring our fantasy wrestling hobby, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real. I'm your host, Mikey Unlikely, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Atomic Dropcast Network. All right, everybody, it's episode 32, and today we've got a great episode for you. Joining us here on the interview is Chris, the handler of Chris Brock. We've got a fun interview there, and we've also got the question of the week and the spotlight. That and much, much more. More information on EWTs and more information on what being a patron will get you these days. I'm so glad you guys are joining us here on this Sunday or Tuesday, depending on when you're listening. Really appreciate all of your support. If you want to follow the show on Twitter, we are at the Efed Podcast. That's the number one way to get a hold of us and interact with us is over there on the Twitter machine. If you want to jump in the Discord, that link is in the Twitter profile. Hop in there and you can check out our own little Efed community. It's a great place. You can talk shop, you can talk wrestling, you can talk anything you want to talk. We also have a spot where you can shill your shit. All of that and much, much more. Guys, check it out, the Discord. We've also got the Patreon. I don't know what it's supposed to be called. Over at patreon.com/Efed podcast. If you want to support the show, we are a free show every Tuesday. You can get the show early. You can get a lot of extra benefits. All of that over at patreon.com/Efed podcast. Now that we got the shill shit out of the way, the Efed podcast is ready to go. Before we get started, here is a word from our sponsors.
OCW Efed is a hybrid pro wrestling Efed that combines elements of roleplay and competitive play using the WWE 2K franchise. Whether you're on PlayStation or Xbox, OCW Efed is a creative outlet for gamers and pro wrestling fans alike. With over 16 years experience producing weekly content and live Twitch events, OCW Efed has a thriving community with handlers from all over the world. If this sounds like your cup of tea, come check us out at OCWFed.com, OCW Fed TV on YouTube, and OCW Fed on Twitch. It's like D&D for wrestling nerds.
Hey guys, are you digging this podcast? Well, we really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you check out my other podcast. The Atomic Dropcast is a look back at the wrestling of yesteryear through adult eyes. We watch the wrestling that we watched as kids, as adults, with a couple of beers in our hands. It's a great time. Check it out over at atomicdropcast.com. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Defiance, an angle fed boasting 8 years of continuous fantasy wrestling. Defiance offers opportunities for original characters, micros, a standalone website utilizing Backstage 3 script, and a forum hosted on the long-running fwrestling.com, as well as a roster full of some of the most experienced writers in the game. Come see for yourself at defiancewrestling.com. That's defiancewrestling.com.
Hey everybody, it's Mikey. No, we're not back to the show just yet. First, I want to tell you about my Patreon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh no, am I going to have to pay for the podcast? No. The answer is emphatically no. The show has been and forever will be free. No, Brunk, you will not have to pay for the podcast. However, we have been asked by a handful of people how they can help support the show. And we've also been asked, mostly by Fuzz, why we didn't have a Patreon yet. And I quote, "You stupid I can't believe you don't have a Patreon. I will hurt you if you don't take my money now." End quote. That was Fuzz. He's a scary dude. So with that in mind, you can find us at patreon.com/Efed podcast. Contributions start as low as $3 a month. Thank you very much for your consideration. Please get Fuzz off our backs. The Efed question of the week is brought to you by the EWC. The Extreme Wrestling Corporation is the game's longest-running roleplay Efed, having been established in 1997. With over 100 active role players across 4 unique brands, the EWC offers opt-in booking on all of its bi-weekly shows. It's home to Stranglemania and the 4-day wrestling festival known as WrestleFest. The EWC is built on its welcoming community with zero bias and no drama. All styles are welcome, Come check out the EWC today at EWC4life.com. That's EWC, the number 4, life.com. All right, guys, up next is the Efed podcast question of the week. And this week, we've got an interesting one. How important are defined roles, heel and face, today? And does having neutral talent help or hurt that? On the Twitter machine, we got at Godly Ken Davidson. Almost every classic story has a defined face-heel dynamic, whether it's Dorothy and the Witch in The Wizard of Oz or John Macklin and Hans Gruber in Die Hard. Neutral characters generally are just there and have no real impact on the story. Interesting take. At Chris Brock EWC, our interview guest this week, I think those that do take a defined role can be more effective because of it. The one thing I don't like seeing is all of the Attitude Era face characters who think they can go heel whenever they come up with a good bum for their opponents and still be a face after. A good burn. I don't know why I said good bum. I do love a good bum though. At the Mangler DPW, while having a non-defined character role can make it easier to work as a face or a heel in any storyline, to me it's lazy writing. Don't try to take the easy way out, try to justify the actions of the character based on the defined role. If it's easy, you did it right. At Firestorm Blazin', I find my angle one of redemption. It's going to start off very neutral. It's up to the Fed head to push me past the neutrality. Interesting. At JVD Rooster, our old friend, IMO, there are very few true faces, way too many neutrals trying to be anti-hero faces, and a plethora of cheap heat heels and very few true ruthless heels. The bulk of today's wrestlers fall into the middle, too, because it's easier to shoot on opponents without worrying about the shackles of being good or evil. You have to reach deep to find ways of creatively shooting while playing a Ricky Steamboat or a Jake Roberts heel. Give me more reason to like or hate you than just, I'm better, you suck. To be fair, I am better and you do suck. No, I'm just kidding. At OCWB17, too many cool characters that try to be everything. More character flaw faces needed and less cheap heat heels. Nothing makes me roll my eyes more than people swearing on Twitter trying to be cool. I'm with that. At Distorted Amber, as someone who writes what I like to consider a chaotic neutral, I think it depends on what you want in your fee as such, and the type of storytelling you want to promote. Defined roles are fantastic if people are willing to write them to their full potential. Like in real life, there are characters that can spend their career as only face or heel. Having neutrals, I think, gives those people something different and potentially a new creative direction. Very good. At New Extremes W, I tend to operate on the D&D alignment system, where there's like 40 options. Over on the Discord side, at Judge Megan, high rank. As someone who played all 3 roles in the past, I think they are important. Nowadays in wrestling, you don't know who is heel or face. In Efedding, they are just as important. Playing a face can be tricky, but you just got to make it work. Heel could be fun, but you have to be careful of what you say. Thanks, Meg. At Don't Need a Stevenspedia shirt, aka Pete. It's important, but people lose nuance. Heels need to believe that they're the good guy. Anyone who is heel because they just like to be evil is two-dimensional and dumb. Baby faces are the heroes because they're flawed. A Mary Sue is boring. No yeehaws. At Mongo the Destroyer, I think it's by nature. Following the old school face versus heel booking in a Fed is very limiting. Thing is that if you're watching it on TV in real life, sure, heel versus heel doesn't really make sense. But I mean, at some point you sort of need everyone to face off against everyone, and especially in an RP Fed, it's just about who plays their character better and who trashes the opponent better. Well, if that's the case, then it's basically person versus person rather than good versus bad. I do think that having on the application, though, is helpful so that people have an idea of how a character is supposed to work. So I think it's useful to have defined roles, but at the same time, I wouldn't let it have any bearing on how I book matches. A good feud is a good feud. Very interesting answer. Thanks, Mongo. I enjoyed that one. At Beautiful Bobby Best, I agree with Pete. It's important, but not many people tend to stick with their alignments. 1 week they're good, 1 week bad, a lot of flip-flopping. I think it's evolved more into a D&D alignment scheme. People are chaotic good, assholes who want to be cheered, or lawful evil, people who are booed but never do anything bad. True story. At Jakey, he says this is the best answer to the question ever, and he's referring to Pete. Everyone loves Pete's answer this week. At Seth is Burns, I'm pretty much going to third Pete's response. Jesus, come on, guys. It's important and often gets forgotten sometimes. I have seen some contradictory things involving, air quotes, faces, burn his heel's rival's car to get his attention, or something the heel hadn't done. The face literally started the feud. I've seen air quotes heels play to the crowd in matches and act like they're Shawn Michaels. The go with God Shawn, not the prima donna 90s Shawn. Get out of here with that shit, pick a side, and play it right. This is coming from one of the best babyface writers in the game, Seth Burns. At Pete, again, so the answer to the question of the week is always listen to Pete, pretty much. At Giant Bilba, no. Now I'm just reading a chat. This is getting out of hand. At Alex Smiley, speaking from experience, too many people want to do heelish things, but still be cheered by the crowd. F that noise. If we can't clearly define baby faces or heels, then what do we need to do is go by D&D alignment guidelines, which seems to be consensus, guys. Either you want to play faces and heels, and you want to have defined rules, or you want to be D&Ders. So that's the answer to the question of the week, apparently. Thanks, everybody, for answering. I appreciate it. You can pop in on the Discord and answer in the hashtag Efed Question of the Week channel, or on Twitter. The question of the week is always pinned to the top of the profile, and there you can answer it and be featured here on the show.
Hey, this is Justin, the handler of Scott Stevens, the mastermind behind Stevenspedia, the wrestling encyclopedia. You are listening to the Efed podcast, the one and only podcast. Listen to the Efed podcast and nothing else.
And it's time once again for the Efed podcast spotlight. I'm really excited about this one, guys, because it's going to be a little bit different. We're not covering a single Efed. In fact, we're covering a system of Efeds, a conglomerate of Efeds, a network of Efeds. The XHF network is a conglomerate of Efeds. Imagine the NWA during the territory days. While they were still shared events, a few global titles, and one main body, each of the feds run independently with their own rosters, titles, management, and rules. That's the structure of the XHF as well. All of the feds are run independently by their own owners with their own staff, but the network itself acts as an umbrella over all of them and takes care of global events. In terms of the individual feds, they are both angle and roleplay. They have several roleplay feds, and they all have different styles, focuses, formats, and word limits. There are a couple of angle feds too, which run in different ways as well. Aside from those, there's a fed that determines things via dice rolls, and one that simulates matches on Fire Pro. Also a new fed that just launched that will be using a format similar to WWE card games. So regardless of what kind of fed you're into, XHF is going to have one of each. I've never even played in a dice rolling fed, didn't even know they were still around. I'm definitely going to have to check that one out. For global or inter-fed matches, they're usually roleplay based, unless the owners or workers agree to doing things angled to forward storylines. From the fed perspective, it's up to each individual how often their shows and pay-per-views are. However, the network runs 4 major events each year that you can mark on your calendar. For 5 weeks, concluding the last Sunday in October, they open the season with the End of Days tournament. Shows that run weekly, and often a fed or two will co-produce one of the shows with their own matches on the card as well. Feds are encouraged to have their own matches on the final night. The last Sunday in January is Supremacy, which is usually a pretty stacked card as feds put on matches to show off their styles. 2 weeks before that is a smaller show in which we decide the contenders to the X-Crown match at the pay-per-view itself. The last Sunday in April is the XHF Network Rumble. It's an all-corners Rumble match with no upper limit on how many can join. The match was 60 people this year, and I think we had about 160 role plays in the roughly 2.5 week window. Holy hell, guys. Mongo, you're a crazy man. The season finale, so to speak, is Night of Champions. Along with other matches, almost every world title in the network is defended somewhere. It's the big one, but all 4 major events are pretty big. Generally, the X-Crown matches are no limits in terms of the role play and word count. Even when we limit the number of RPs for the tag team titles or the End of Days tournament or anything else, there's still no limits on the X-Crown. In terms of rules, it's basic sort you'll see. There's nothing particularly draconian about how they run the network. The feds have their own standards. Slurs are obviously censored by the board because they hate it. Nothing sexist, racist, etc. They usually push for promos to be the sort of thing you'd see on network television, nothing too offensive. But again, each fed does have their own standards. They have many active championships within each fed, of course, but then they also have a top 10 in their fed, and they have about 5 or 6 individual global championships. It's an interesting concept. I'm really into it. Check them out, guys. XHF09.proboards.com, the XHF Network. home of an insane amount of feds and roster. As far as the feds that are there, they've currently host the AWF, J-Rock, UOW, DW, SWAT, MCCW, GUNS, CW, TGK, DSWA, the FWA, the DSF, the RFW, and CAR. There's all kinds of cool feds going on here, and regardless whether you're angle, roleplay, simulation, dice, it don't matter. XHF has it all. xhf09.proboards.com. Check them out, guys. They are the Efed Podcast Spotlight this week. We're happy to have them on. Good group of guys. And you can check them out, XHF. Give it a Google. You'll find them, he says. XHF Network. It's pretty easy to find. Last week on the show, we made the huge announcement that we're opening up EWTees.com and EFedTees.com. Either which way you go, you can't miss it. We're going to have official merchandise, t-shirts for characters, for tag teams, for stables, for entire feds. And we're happy to announce that Defiance Wrestling, the Angle Fed, has signed on to be an exclusive partner with EWTees and provide official merchandise, as well as the 2K Fed Ring the Bell Wrestling. Their merchandise is going to be available very soon over at EWTees.com here on July 1st, 2020. We're also in the works with Five Boroughs Wrestling. Their official merchandise will be hot over there at EWTees.com. And I would appreciate if any of you would check it out. Efed Tees, we got the little static page up there now. You can find us on Twitter at eWrestlingTees. This is a real t-shirt store. We've gotten the question many times, is this a storyline gimmick store where we can put our merchandise up for angle reasons? No, this is a t-shirt store where you can submit your designs, you can buy the shirt, and it will be delivered to you. Have you ever wanted a t-shirt for your character? Now is your chance. Get with us, whether you have graphics, need graphics, we've got a staff on hand for graphic designers, and we're ready to go. EFedTees.com, at eWrestlingTees on Twitter, or get at Mikey or Brian in the Discord, and we can help you out, answer any questions you have. Get in on the ground floor, EWTees.com. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Efed Podcast interview series. This week, we're joined by Chris. He's one of the more experienced handlers of a very, very well-known Fed, not only here on the Efed Podcast, but all amongst the Efed community, the EWC. Chris is a longtime handler and now a staffer, if I'm not mistaken. Chris, thanks for taking the time to join the show. I'm sure we're going to talk about EWC and much, much more about your history. Appreciate your time. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Mikey. Thank you for asking, man. I hope you're doing well tonight, too.
Doing well, very well. So really appreciate you coming on. And just before the show, we were talking about how you have a little bit of podcasting experience.
I do, yes. So if you have any fans in the Florida area, back around 2007 or so, I hosted two different podcasts about wrestling. First one was called Electrified Wrestling Radio, where we talked specifically about Florida independent wrestling. And then I hosted a show called Wrestling Revolution, or no, it was called We Are Wrestling. It was just a podcast in general about, again, wrestling all over the place. We did about like 4 hours every Sunday.
And I was mentioning it's more than Raw.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we're talking, this was a time when we had 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, might even have been an hour of ECW TV still, I can't remember, TNA, ROH, the whole nine yards. We would do that, and we would sit there and break it all down. We'd watch the pay-per-views, the whole nine yards, and we enjoyed it. There were like four of us. We also did a short-lived audio drama that was a complete parody of everything that is like just absurd and out there about independent wrestling schools, like the really small, seedy ones. It was called Breaking In, and it was actually a story about these two kids who decide they want to go to wrestling school. And we had like we spoofed so many people. Like one of the characters I played was this guy named the dirty streets, the North American fantasy, the dirty streets instead of dusty roads. We had a guy named Mango who was supposed to be Mongo McMichael, Steve
There
Mongo
you go.
McMichael. We had a guy named the Mutilator, who was supposed to be like Hogan. The Grasshopper, who was your generic Japanese guy or Asian guy. We had a random Samoan just for the sake of it, because hey,
they wrestle. They all wrestle,
right? Yeah, they all wrestle. So we just had fun, man. It was just making fun of the industry that we loved so much, and that was kind of how we got some of our fan base, because we had people that be like, yeah, man, I love that breaking in stuff, and it was crazy because it was a lot of the wrestlers that we knew. Like, it wasn't just fans, it was the actual workers. And I was like, really? Like, we didn't like insult you? He's like, no, god damn, man, that's funny as shit. I mean, we were just like, okay, yeah, hey, like, we've got something here. But yeah, we did that. I did that for a while, up until right around 2010. And then I moved out of Florida, moved to the Northeast for about 9 years. And then I just moved back to Florida this last October. So I haven't done podcasting in a very, very long time. But yeah, it was something I did for a while and I loved it.
That's awesome. Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
Well, good deal. Well, Chris, tell us about how you got into wrestling in general.
Oh, man, that is a loaded question, because like we were talking about off air, man, I have kind of wrestling in my blood from a very young age. So one of my first memories is my stepfather. He had this Harley in the 1980s, and he used to take me on rides all the time. And I can specifically remember this one day. He just comes in, he says, hey, man, get ready to go. We're going to go take a bike ride. I said, cool. Yeah, awesome. I'm like 6, 7 years old, right?
Yeah, you're ready. Always ready.
So we get on his bike and we start driving, and we end up in front of the West Palm Beach Auditorium, which is a pretty historical wrestling building. Florida Championship, or not Florida Championship, but Championship Wrestling of Florida used to run there all the time. The NWA ran there all the time. And WWE, that's where they used to do house shows in Palm Beach County.
Very nice.
That building is no longer a venue. It was bought by Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's now a religious building. But yeah, I always find it funny because that building housed concerts by people like Marilyn Manson, and now it's a religious building.
Exactly.
But yeah, so he took us to the West Palm Beach Auditorium, and it was for a WWE house show. So I remember sitting there, and it was, way past my bedtime, but I was just like, I was glued, man. I was like, yes, this is awesome. Hogan was supposed to be there that night, and I guess he was either sick or couldn't make it or something.
That's what they told you.
Yeah, and the main event ended up, I think it was Earthquake that stood in for him instead.
Oh, that's quite the replacement.
Yeah, but then like my first actual televised event that I went to that made it on television was actually something that's been relevant again this past week, right? So they just did NXT Takeover in Your House.
In Your House, yeah.
The In Your House that they modeled it after was which one? In Your House 11, It's Time, which was from the West Palm Beach Auditorium. So that was actually, I believe, I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be wrong, one of, if not the first pay-per-view appearance of Juan Rocky Maivia.
Oh, really?
So I got to see one of The Rock's very first matches in WWE, which was fantastic. That card was headlined by The Executioner versus The Undertaker in a arena house brawl. So that the auditorium had a moat around it, and they ended up in the moat. That's what I remember vividly.
I remember the show. Yeah, that's crazy.
They were fighting in the moat, and I was like, "Holy crap, they're fighting in the moat!" But yeah, so. My stepdad's a guy from Ohio, like yourself.
Yes.
So he was a big wrestling fan. My dad is a guy from Michigan. He's a big wrestling fan. I kind of grew up with it. I always loved it. And I grew up, I'm a kid, I was born in the early to mid 80s. So I'm mostly a kid of the 90s wrestling scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for me, man, it was Monday night, dude. I was watching Nitro. That was it.
Really? Nitro
was my show. I wasn't a huge Raw fan. I was a Nitro fan, and the reason why was because of my two favorite wrestlers of all time, which would be Sting and Diamond Dallas Page.
Great segue. The next question was, who are your favorites?
Yeah. So I think I saw Sting for the first time on television, and I just looked at him and I was like, man, like this dude is like this is the American dude. Like obviously you got Hogan.
He's face paint Sting. He's Surfer Sting.
He's Surfer Sting, right? So it's 90s California Baywatch era kind of Sting, right?
He fits right in.
I kind of fell in love with the gimmick and the way he represented himself. And he may not have been the greatest worker of all time. I'm not under any false assumption there, but he has a baby face.
Oh, he's great.
You're hard pressed to find a better baby face, right?
Absolutely.
And then Diamond Dallas Page comes along. And this is an everyman from Jersey, and he's just, he's giving it his all and chasing his dream. Like, Jesus, like, you can't write that story any better than Diamond Dallas Page. I mean, yeah, that was it, man. Like DDP and Sting, and then I started going back and watching more older stuff, and I saw, Dusty Rhodes, obviously one of the greatest baby faces of all time. Rest in peace, man. I mean, I was just fascinated by it. And then the NWO stuff came along, and all this other stuff. And so what I would typically do is I would watch Nitro until it went to 3 hours. I would watch Nitro, and then I'd watch the last hour of Raw.
Yeah.
And then when they both went, when they were both pretty much in the same time zone, I was like, well, damn it, now what do I do? So it was just, bouncing back and forth between commercials and whatnot. But yeah, I grew up a big fan that way. And since then I've obviously come to appreciate WWE, and they've done a lot of stuff. And TNA, was good for what it was. ROH has been great. Impact Wrestling is still doing pretty well now. I've been a huge fan of AEW ever since its inception. I think that they're hitting that nostalgia piece that people have been longing for a long time.
Yep.
And they are a much more grown-up product. So, that's what people wanted. They wanted that grown-up product that didn't treat you like a child.
Absolutely.
It's education. It's like almost educational wrestling at this point. But I've loved seeing the stuff that they're doing, and, seeing guys like Moxley, and, Jericho is now in that same Hogan role that Hogan was in WCW.
It's good to see people happy to wrestle again.
Yes, Matt Hardy. Like, anytime Matt Hardy's left WWE, he's always been elated every time he steps in the ring. So it's like, I get it, man. You had to take the paycheck, but dude, like, you are so much happier outside of WWE.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm a big fan. I will say I haven't had a chance to really research or get into Puro or any of the stuff, strong style coming out of Japan. I'd love to if I ever had the time. But I'm in my 30s now. I have a wife. I have a job that sucks my soul a lot of times. So, it's hard pressed to just sit there and watch old wrestling footage. But
yes,
I definitely try to watch as much as I can, especially now that I'm active with e-fedding again, because it's, you got to know what the product is to know what people are looking at as, hey, this is what I like, you know?
A pile driver is not going to get over in 2020.
Absolutely.
It's got to be a Canadian destroyer these days. So,
or it's like, it's like an elbow from the top rope with that spinning thing at the end.
Yes, you got to swing real hard. Yeah. So that's awesome, and you're a big fan of WCW, which is really cool because I don't get a lot of that. I get a lot of the opposite. Or if people were WCW fans, it's usually, hey, I was an NWA fan. It was an '80s thing. But it sounds like you're more in my age group where, I hit my teenage years in the late '90s, and that's when I was hooked in.
Oh yeah.
So moving onward and upward from Sting and DDP, who are your favorites like later years, or even now?
Yeah. I mean, once WCW was done, that was right around the time guys like Daniel Bryan were coming in, CM Punk, John Cena. I have a huge respect for John Cena. A lot of people I know like to, the smart fans like to say how he buried people and this and that. But I think if you go back and look, I wouldn't say that a lot of his work supports that. I think that he did a lot for a lot of people, but they wanted to tell a story of a guy who was better than the man they called immortal. Right. And when you call Hulk Hogan immortal, you've got to have a guy better than that. Right. So it was they kind of painted themselves in a corner, I think, with John Cena. But I appreciate what he did. I appreciate what a lot of guys have done since. I think Roman Reigns, despite all the crap he gets, is a pretty solid wrestler. But there's also a lot of guys that aren't getting a lot of attention that really should. Guys like Shinsuke Nakamura, who is a phenomenal worker.
Love him.
I saw his first match at that takeover with Sami Zayn, and I was like, holy God, if this man does not win a world title in the next 5 years, I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so he's struggled, and if you believe what you hear about backstage rumors, some of that's his fault, some of that's other people's fault. But the fact remains, he is one hell of a worker.
He did win a world title though, didn't he?
I don't believe he's won a world title. No, he's won the Intercontinental title. He's won the U.S. title. I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I'll own it, of course. But
fact check us, I guess.
Fact check us, please. Anybody listening to this, fact check us. Let us know. Like, comment, and subscribe. Right? Did I do that right?
He's got the shill down.
Yeah. So, but yeah, who else? I mean, I think obviously women's wrestling is so much better than it was back in the 90s.
Agreed.
You've got ladies like Paige and Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch and, the four horsewomen, Sasha Bailey, all of them. I think that, even the ones that I'm not a fan of their style. I'll give you an example of Shayna Baszler. I'm not a huge fan of the way, because she blurs the line too much, I think, sometimes.
I love realism.
I love realism, but sometimes you take it too far. And if you take it too far and you work yourself into a shoot, that's the phrase there. If you work yourself into a shoot, it doesn't work. So, but I think overall she knows what she's doing.
Like you in the Florida independent scene, I saw her grow up here in Cleveland.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
AIW, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There's a lot of independent wrestlers or guys that I saw before they became big, seeing that Florida independent wrestling scene. One of them is MVP.
Oh, awesome.
MVP grew up in Florida. So he worked for FIP for a long time. He worked for FOW, which is a federation from South Florida called Future of Wrestling.
Okay.
They ran for a very long time in the 90s and then stopped and came back several times. But yeah, MVP grew up here. The Usos started in Florida and the independents before they got signed because, AFA, they're Office kids. So he trained them. That's where his school is now. The Funk, Dory Funk has a school here. The Dudleys have a school here. God, who else has a school in Florida? I mean, there's so many big names that have, wrestling presences or wrestling schools in Florida.
Most retirees go to Florida, so it's not a surprise.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this name, but it's a very very obscure trivia point that you get if you do. Do you know the name Rusty Brooks?
No, I do not.
Yeah, Rusty Brooks' claim to fame is he once jobbed to Hulk Hogan on I think it was a Saturday night event.
So of course he opened a wrestling school.
Well, but no, he was a solid wrestler. That's the difference. Rusty Brooks was a fantastic wrestler. He just, he couldn't put it all together at the right place at the right time. That's really what it comes down to. But fundamentally, he has produced a lot of really great people that have come out of South Florida. But yeah, so there's a lot of that. But yeah, I think, and in today's, current, I guess, market, I'm a huge fan of Jordan Grace.
Oh, nice.
I think she's got a fantastic look, a fantastic approach. Outside of wrestling, she is a fantastic human being from what I can see. So I think she's great. I think that, Drew McIntyre, I was glad to see him finally get a shot and get a run.
Yes.
It's unfortunate what happened in the times that it's happening right now.
It was a great Rumble.
It was a great Rumble. Yeah, it was a great Rumble. I think, the way they've portrayed Seth Rollins and the way he's ebbed and flowed and turned has been great. I'm a huge Moxley fan. He did absolutely everything the right way to get where he wanted to be and where he was happy again in wrestling, and kudos to him for that. Same thing with FTR, the Revival. I think they did the same thing. They did what they were told. They shut up, they took it, and they got out of their contract and did it the right way.
Professionals.
And I respect that. Yeah, you got to be a professional, man. I think Cody Rhodes, despite people thinking that he's just booking himself because he's an EVP of AEW, the dude is legitimately one of the better.
He's the best wrestler they have. Yeah. One of the best wrestlers they have.
He's the best pure wrestler. Yeah.
Yes, and a great storyteller. He's very, very talented.
And to see him and his brother finally get that proper run, as the Rhodes brothers, that's their birthright in my opinion.
I said it on my old podcast. Goldust should have been a monster heel world champion.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda. Unfortunately, right? He got into the comedy act and it stuck, and that's what
it got to be too much.
If anything, Malik would have been the monster heel version of Goldust that would have won the world title in TNA. But that didn't work either. The other thing outside of WCW that caught my attention in the 90s was ECW.
Yeah.
And, I vividly remember finding ECW at 2 a.m. on the Florida Sports Network, right? And I just remember flipping the channels and seeing Taz's ugly mug with an orange towel over it, cutting a promo, and I went, who is this guy? And so that was the start of me.
They ended up doing some house shows and stuff down there, didn't they? Or pay-per-view even.
They did. Yeah, there were a couple pay-per-views done in Fort Lauderdale. I didn't get a chance to go to any of them. But I have also, so I moved to the Northeast, like I told you, for 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Southwest Pennsylvania, about an hour from Philadelphia.
Okay.
I have been to the ECW arena. It is an amazing building for wrestling history. It is a horrible building to watch a wrestling show in. I caught a taping of ROH television there, and it was just so hot. It was so hot, and we're talking. This was before Memorial Day. I was watching this show,
midsummer.
So early spring, even mid-spring, not even summer yet, and it was just miserable in that hot box. But yeah, ECW was a big influence on me too. So yeah, I could sit here and talk wrestling all night now. Like I said, it's been ingrained in me from a very young age.
Well, let's get to why we're here then. Let's get into e-wrestling. How did you find the crazy hobby that is e-wrestling? Obviously, you were a big wrestling person.
Yeah. So I think I first got into it, if I'm remembering correctly, I first got into it by finding it through a WCW fan chat on AOL, like circa 96, 97-ish. Maybe 95 even. I've been sitting down trying to figure out exactly what year it was for like the last week, and I can't remember, but somewhere around that time, right? So I started off in real wrestler feds, and of course, when your idol growing up is an everyman from Jersey, of course DDP is going to be the guy you take, right?
Yep.
So I started with that, and then I started getting cease and desist letters from people who would report real wrestling feds back when it was mailing lists and stuff. So I was like, all right, like I can't, I don't want to get in trouble because, of course, again, I'm 12, 13 years old here. So I started just kind of seeing, well, is there anything else out there? And I had a friend of mine at the time. I was in middle school, and his name was also Chris, but he spelled it with a K. And he was like, have you heard of Efeds? And I was like, holy crap, another one of me. There's more people that exist, right? And so we got to talking, and we got to get to know each other. He claimed, and I say claimed because I never proved it or disproved it, to be Diamond Dallas Page's nephew. Never got to prove it or disprove it, so I'm not going to say whether he was or wasn't, but it is what it is. But he actually introduced me to one of my first original character feds, which led me to probably one of the longest runs in e-fedding I've ever had, which was a fed called UCF Ultimate Championship Fighting. Very original, I know.
Yes.
But it was run by this guy named Lasaris. His real name's Sean. He's actually from Broward County, which was the next county down from me in Florida. I come to find out years later. But his name was Lasaris, and it was a massive fed. There were probably close to 70 or 80 handlers, legit 70 or 80. It wasn't people having multiple characters or anything like that. After going back and forth with a couple of just going nowhere type of characters, I started thinking about, all right, I need a new character. I need something new. I need something fresh. And around that time is when I started seeing a lot of Mikey Whipwreck matches.
Yep.
I started hearing about his story, right? Like how he started on the ring crew and, he worked his way up and this and that. And so I was like, yeah, that's a story right there. That's a story. So I kind of took that idea and I modified it a little bit. I even, I got together with the owner of UCF and I said, hey, here's my pitch. I want to come off as a guy that starts off your ring crew, gets a shot, gets his ass kicked for a while. It's going to take me a while to figure this out. And I was like, yeah, I love it. Let's do it. So we did it for a while, and I started going. And, as I built up more steam, I started building out history and story behind the character. And when I was looking for a name for the character, I was like, well, it's always easiest to stick with something, So Chris is my real first name for anybody out there that doesn't know. And so there was I was walking home from school one day, and I was passed by this used car lot, and it was called Brock Auto Sales. And I just went, that's it. Right there, Chris Brock. There it is. So that's why I chose that as a last name. But just as eFeds are now, eFeds have always been swarmed with heels. Everybody you look at is a heel. And I was like, you know what? I want to go against the grain. I want to be a face. I just want to be a pure baby face. And so that, I think, made it harder for me to succeed in eFedding. But
now, were these role play feds you're in, or angle feds?
Yeah, no, these were all. I've never been in an angled fed ever.
Wow.
I'm not a fan of them. I don't see the point in them, to be honest with you. And that's just my personal opinion. I don't mean to offend any angled fed owner out there, people that love angled feds. It's just not my cup of tea. But you do you, right? So, yeah, it's always been straight up role play feds. And back when it was mailing lists and stuff, you're chucking 10,000 word monster RPs.
Yes.
I mean, they were just it was like writing a Bible every week for your show. And then, I started to catch momentum with the Chris Brock character, and got into probably the greatest rivalry, I guess you would say, I've ever had in e-fedding at the time too, is against this guy named Jin, Jin. Never knew his first name, but he and I would talk constantly because we feuded for probably the better part of 2.5, 3 years.
Wow.
And I never could beat this guy. That little, I don't know what the hell, I don't know how he did it. I still, to this day, if I were to go back and read those RPs, probably would never be able to figure it out. But I could never beat the guy. He just, every time we fought, he would beat me over and over and over and over again. But what I did catch on to, and one of the things I learned personally, was that you've got to make it real as much as possible. So there was a character called Crow, and as you can imagine, this is Crow era Sting.
Yeah,
so
very
this guy's
blatant
using,
copy.
Yeah, this guy's using Brandon Lee as his pick base from the Crow and whatnot. And he held their version of the hardcore title, right? And so I got put into a match with this guy out of nowhere, non-title match, and he just, I thought I put up a decent RP, whatever, but I basically got jobbed out to this guy. I mean, I got destroyed. The match was a complete squash, and I got thrown through a couple tables and this, that, and the other. And I was so pissed off. I was like, this is bullshit. Like, I put out a pretty decent RP. I shouldn't have been so one-sided. But then the more I think about it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to use this to my advantage. Because the next week I was booked in a tournament to determine a new number one contender to this guy's title. So I said, okay. I said, I'm going to go a completely different route with this. So I laid out the story of my RP that I had my jaw crushed in that first match with Crow. And so my first RP in that tournament, I never spoke a word.
Wow.
I actually had another character who was a real life friend of mine. I said, hey man, can I use your character for an RP? He goes, what do you mean? And I was like, this is my idea. And I laid it out to him. He's like, I dig it. Let's go for it. So it was basically just like a shaky cam footage, right? And he's standing here on a pier at night reading off of a piece of paper, and like every couple paragraphs he's like, why am I doing this again? Like, it was just like a little bit of comedy interjected here and there. But it was basically him reading a prepared statement from me because I couldn't talk because, again, my jaw was wired shut. So I was like, all right, I don't care if I win or lose. Like, I think this is pretty creative. This is making it real. There's real consequences to what we do, right? And so I won that match. And I was like, all right, so the next week, I'm still probably not going to be able to talk. We're talking 2 weeks removed from having your jaw crushed, and it's going to take a while. But basically what it comes down to, I came down to the end of the tournament, and it was me against Jen again, and I lost to him again.
Oh, no.
I don't think I ever held a title in that Fed, to be totally honest with you, ever. But then eventually that Fed shut down, and somebody else who was in the Fed decided they were going to start another Fed called GWA, which was my first exposure to a Fed on boards, on message boards, kind of like a lot of them do now that aren't like social media based.
Yep, absolutely.
And
a lot of board Feds out there.
Yeah. Yeah, so GWA came around, and I started to get a little bit involved with being staff in that Fed as far as helping write a match here or there, stuff like that. That was run by a guy named Brian Titan, who, from what I understand, lived in the Carolinas. So that lasted for a little while, and then that shut down, and then there was another Fed that I went to, and it might have been another Fed like GCW or GWA or something like that. But I went into that Fed with another in real life good friend of mine. By this point, I had 5 or 6 people that were good friends of mine that were all e-fedders in real life because I had gotten them into the hobby. My high school girlfriend, I had gotten into the hobby. She was a e-fedder for a while.
That's goals for most people.
Goals, right? Yeah. We're not together anymore. Let's just put it that way.
I beat her.
So, but yeah, I had a good number of friends. And so my one friend, Miles, and I came in to this one Fed and started kind of working our way up, and couple months go by and we get my other friend Kenny to join, we get my other friend Eric to join, and it's pretty soon there's 4 or 5 of us in this Fed, and we're all real life friends, and we come up with the idea of, well, let's start a stable, right? Or we're like, all right, cool, let's start a stable. So we started this stable that we called Dynasty, And it was just one of those things where we wanted it to be like a face version of a mixture of the Four Horsemen and the NWO. Kind of like we didn't, we weren't there to cheat or to lie or steal our way to the top, but we wanted to kind of be respected like those factions were. And eventually, a couple people started to drop off and they couldn't commit anymore after a few more. And we're like a year and a half, 2 years in. And then it's pretty soon just my friend Miles and I left. And I know it was about a year in. I apologize, not 2 to 3 years. But this whole time, like, I'm starting to realize, like, wait a minute, like, I haven't lost a match yet. Like, it just occurred to me one day, I haven't lost a match yet. And so I finally start getting that attention from the whole Fed. And I got a world title match. And I ended up winning the world title from a guy who it turns out was actually plagiarizing his RPs from another Fed. Like stealing them from the top guy word for word almost.
Wow.
Which by the way, I ever find someone doing that, like that's like dude, like no, like there's no excuse for that. Like write your own.
No, can you link me to your piece?
Yeah, right. But yeah, I ended up winning the world title and then going about another almost year not losing it. And it was just like, holy crap. Like I felt like I'd kind of hit my groove.
Something.
And so that was actually the one and only Fed that I've ever had Brock turn heel in. I've been a face for almost my entire e-Fedding career, but after about 6 months of having the belt, I slowly but surely started turning him heel. And like, because what we did is my buddy Miles, who was the other person still with me, he was like, basically we're going to corrupt Brock. We're going to have him get corrupted slowly but surely. And like I remember one RP we did, I kind of wrote it as if right after Brock had dropped acid. So it was like he was processing all this stuff while on acid for the first time in his life. And I've never done acid. So I was like, okay, this will be weird. But you do all this stuff. So I ended up keeping the belt, I think, for close to 18 months. And right before I dropped the belt, right before I finally lost, I found out the reason why all my friends had left that Fed.
Why is that?
They took the Fed over and didn't tell me. They were running the Fed for like 9 months or so of my title reign. It never told me until they couldn't hold it back anymore, basically, because word was just getting out. Because I remember going over to my friend Eric's house, and he was in his room typing away. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Like, we're supposed to hang out tonight. Like, we were supposed to, do whatever. He's like, oh, I'm a little busy, blah, blah, blah. And I walk in and I see him writing the fucking results for the show. I'm like, all right, I didn't realize you were doing match writing. I thought you would quit that Fed. He's like, yeah, we should probably talk. And I was like, you little bastard. But I mean, I will tell you, like, it wasn't like they were doing me a favor and keeping the belt on me. Like, they assured me I legitimately won those matches. And I legitimately lost the belt when I lost the belt. And, and at that point I kind of became more of a staffer for them and took a step back, and got more into doing staff work. But yeah, so that was that Fed. I tried my hand at running my own Fed for a while. After I was a main general manager for another Fed. So right after I moved to the northeast part of the United States, I got in touch with this guy named Caleb, and he was running this Fed called Legacy Pro Wrestling LPW. So a small Fed, only had about a roster of about 15 or so. But I came in and he was like, I need a general manager. I need somebody who can help me run the day-to-day stuff. And so I was like, all right, cool. Yeah. So I started doing that, and I started getting to know quite a few people. And that's where I met this guy named Andrew, who I've been friends with ever since. So we're going up on a decade of him and I knowing each other. And he and I started out kind of just really, hitting it off as writers. Like, we both complemented each other's style really well and whatnot. Well, long story short, Caleb basically just sank his Fed. Like, he had no interest in really doing what it took to run a Fed. And so he stepped away. He stepped out of it, and I stepped in, and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not going to keep going with someone else's name. I'm going to start my own shit. So I started my own Fed called Dynasty Championship Wrestling. Lasted about 6 months or so. Just because again, we had such a small roster and I couldn't expand fast enough. It happens. But Andrew and I ran that. and we had some really good RPers that were just dedicated to the cause and to the Fed. When it became apparent, like, this isn't sustainable, I don't have the numbers to do this, I very quickly was like, I'm not going to keep doing this. I'm going to admit defeat. And that's when I got hooked up with the guy who ran APW, and I forget his name, so I apologize. But APW folded into EWC, from what I understand, after I stopped RPing.
Really?
But when we went into APW, Andrew and I were like, man, you and I are really good together. Like, we can write off each other really, really well. Do you want to go in as a tag team? And so we came up with the idea of his character was going to be the son of one of Chris Brock's best friends. And then I actually retired Chris Brock as an active competitor at that point, kind of wrote it in that he had a son that was like going out to be, his own guy. And so we had Warren Peace, which was Andrew's character, and then I had Jay Gatsby, which was my character. And obviously they were literary references. But we went in as I want to say, was it the Forgotten Sons or the Fortunate Sons? I think it was the Fortunate Sons was the name of our tag team. And unfortunately, that only lasted a couple weeks before I had to just step away from fedding altogether for a long time. But yeah, eventually, from what I understand, APW kind of folded into EWC. And so it was kind of funny that, you fast forward 9 years and Andrew, sends me a message one day. He's like, man, he was like, you ever thought about getting back into e-fedding? And I was like, damn, dude, like, it's been so long. Like, I don't know if I could even still do it.
Am I any good? Yeah.
And Andrew is actually a Hall of Famer in EWC. The character's name is Nathan Doe. And so, he convinced me to do it. I started out as a role player, with a completely new character that I'd never role played as before, so we came in as a 3-person group, myself, Andrew, and one other guy. And our objective was we wanted to be monster heels. I'd never really been a monster heel before. So the objective was we were going to get people that complemented different types of wrestling. Right. So he came in as a Japanese wrestler that was trained as a luchador.
Okay.
Right. I came in as a Samoan-born wrestler that was trained in Europe and Japan.
So a strong style and a grappler, yeah.
Yeah. And then we had the third guy who was just an absolute, like, psychotic monster heel, like American corn-fed monster heel. And so we kind of came in with that, and that character's name is Anthony Malietoa. And so I went through and I made this backstory for him, because I think backstory is so important. You have to have a good story to really feed off of. There's actually a bloodline called of Malietoa in the Samoan kind of heritage that was a dynasty at one point, and they were known as just fierce, like, no bullshit,
wow,
no fear warriors. And so I kind of. But then at a certain point, their kind of reputation got tarnished a little bit. So I gave him the backstory that, like, his dad was Samoan, his mom was Tongan, which is similar to Samoan,
Ming.
but not quite. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's kind of like Ming a little bit. You're right. I didn't even think about that when I was doing it. But yeah, good point out. But so he had that kind of mixed whatever in his bloodline, and his parents, like, didn't want him to have to put up with all the crap of being ridiculed on his home island and whatnot. So they actually sent him to New Zealand to be raised by a friend of the family who's a Tongan. And then I kind of built it from there and whatnot. And so we came in as this heel group, and we thought we were going to, do amazing stuff and this and that. But man, competition in the EWC is tough. Let me tell you, absolutely some of the toughest competition, the best writers I've ever come across in 25 years almost of doing this is in the EWC. And I just realized I've probably been talking for 20 minutes without you.
And that's quite all right. That's basically what I was going to ask you. What's the story? How did you get started? The characters and so forth, and you basically covered 10 years of it, so that's good stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned you took a long break, and kind of what was the years of the break, basically?
2010 to about 2018, so 8 or 9.
Okay, so fairly recently.
Yeah. I just came back. I started into the 2018 season in EWC as a role player, and then by like May or so, I think we started in February. And then by May or so, Mac was like, hey, I need 2 or 3 new GMs. And at the time, I had a decently successful run in EWC. Once I figured it out, and once I figured out what they were looking for, and what got over and what really worked and what didn't, the other two people that I came in with, they couldn't put it together. They couldn't figure it out, unfortunately. And so they kind of dropped out, and I was left kind of by myself. And in the process, I had done a face turn, so I was getting over again as a face, which is where I was more comfortable writing from anyway. And so I had this kind of big buildup where I got thrown into a gauntlet match for the international title that was held by Iggy Swango at the time. And so I started number 1 in the gauntlet, and I ran the entire gauntlet until I got to Cyrus Black, who was like the last person before Iggy. And I ended up losing to Cyrus. And yeah, Cyrus was undisputed champion at the end, up to the end of last season in EWC. He was also international champion. He lost that undisputed title at WrestleFest,
the big
which was our
4-day show.
Giant 4-day thing. He lost it to his in-character girlfriend, Melody Malone, which that was an amazing storyline that they told, and I cannot wait for them to get back to writing stories together. I think that's going to be phenomenal when and if that happens. So, but yeah. So anyway, I got to that point, and the general manager at the time from Brawl, which was the show I was on, Monday Night Brawl, he's like, "Hey man, like I just want to let you know, like you came this close to winning the title." And I was like, "Well, thank you. Like you didn't have to tell me that, but thank you." He was like, "So here's what I want to do. Like I want to give you the option. Either A, you can go after Cyrus in the title, because Cyrus ended up winning the international title that night, or I want to bring the U.S. title to Brawl." It was on Rampage at the time. It's being held by Ace King, who, again, one of the greatest writers I've ever had the privilege to read. And he, at the time, was on a historic run that ended, again, at WrestleFest in December, this past December, at 707 days.
That's insane. In a role play,
keep the title that long in an Efed,
that is insane. Absolutely. What a tear of a run.
Yeah, so I was sitting there and I was like, all right, like let me think about it. And then of course, I get the stupid thought in my head, like, hey man, like you can go get that US title. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go take down Ace King, right? So I started building to that, and I was like, I was gaining momentum every week. I felt like I was getting better and better. And then Mac put up a call, and he was like, man, I need GMs, like who wants to step up. And so I will say that my start with EWC wasn't the greatest, because I like to really analyze stuff and understand what's expected of me and things like that. And so I pushed back hard on some things. Probably shouldn't have pushed back as hard as I did, but I always remained professional, because I've always, I have a very professional job. I work in a corporate environment where you've got to be very professional all the time. And so, I asked questions, and I really tried to come from a place of like, I want to understand. And so, looking at it from that standpoint, I said, I could probably do more good overall for this Fed as a member of staff than I could
as a role player. Yeah.
Like they've got so many role players and so many characters, like they don't necessarily need me.
You wouldn't be as missed as a role player as you would helping out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I talked it over with a couple people, and I was like, I'm thinking about doing this. And then I started talking to Mac, and Mac and I just started having conversations and going back and forth. And he was like, like I get a good vibe from you, but let's keep talking. Let's keep building this rapport. And so that was like April, May-ish. And then I went off and got married. And when I came back in June, I took over as general manager of FSW, which is Future Stars of Wrestling, which is kind of like our version of NXT. It's like a development brand in EWC. And
That's
I've
awesome.
been the GM ever since.
So what is it like moving on from the role play role into the staff role? Do you miss it? Do you find the new role more engaging? Things like that.
Oh man, I mean, if I had the time to do both, I absolutely would.
Yes. So you definitely miss it.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I think I've done 2 or 3 matches this season as Anthony, just to keep the character relevant and around. Obviously, in EWC, members of staff can have active role players. We can't go after any titles or chase anything like that.
Right.
Like that's just a hard no, obviously. But
that's a good policy.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with it. But yeah, I kept the character around, and if I have time, I'll opt into a show here or there just to keep myself relevant. But when when COVID hit, like all my free time went away. I was just getting by with what I could do to keep FSW afloat, and so I haven't had a chance in a long time to RP. But yeah, I do miss it sometimes. I wish I could do more of it, and because I love telling stories like that, but I also love telling the stories the way that I tell them as a general manager. Like this is, I have a roster of almost 40 people.
Wow.
Just in FSW.
That's insane.
I think as of right now, I have the largest roster in EWC. I think Brawl they might squeak me out by 1 or 2, or I might be ahead by 1 or 2, something like that. This was very close. But, last year when I took over as the GM of FSW, like I took over, and of course, obviously, I'm kind of learning some stuff on the job. Like I was never good at BBC code or anything like that, and I've been learning that like crazy as I go along here. But I took over, and obviously, there's always a tentativeness when someone new takes over a Fed or a show, and you got to get to know them and whatnot. And I just kind of got the sense that like previous GMs of FSW like didn't really dedicate what needed to be dedicated to it. And it's no knock against them. Like obviously, things come up and things happen, but I came to learn that the FSW GM position was a little cursed before me. They kind of went through GMs pretty quickly.
It's like anything else. It's what you put into is what you're going to get out of it.
Absolutely. So, my objective was I wanted to stabilize the show. I wanted it to really get that shine back to it that people loved about it when it first started. And so, I started reading into the history of the brand as much as I could and why things were done the way they were done and this and that, while also getting to know the new staff of GMs. 3 of the 4 general managers in EWC turned over mid-season last season.
Wow. The
only constant has been the Rampage GM, and then Mac, the face of the company. It's we've learned to get to know each other and figure out where we all come from and how we all fit together. And I think that we did a lot of that last season while also pulling off some absolute freaking amazing events. And I cannot say how proud I was to take part of WrestleFest in December. Man, 4 days.
It's insane.
Like live, we're posting stuff hour by hour. Sometimes, like, oh my god, it was
every morning started at a certain time. It was insane. I loved it.
Oh yeah, it was great. But we also figured out that as awesome as that was, we can't do that more than once a year.
Absolutely.
We tried it with Stranglemania this year. It didn't quite work out as well as we wanted to. Some of that was improper planning on our part, but we also kind of thought, you know what, like WrestleFest needs to have that unique spin to it. Like that's its deal. Its deal is it's a 4-day event and we can do it live. The other shows, not necessarily. They don't need that, right?
Right.
So that's a lesson that we learned, obviously. But yeah, I've spent a lot of time this year just, I feel like my roster knows me now. They know how I'm going to react to things. They know my brain and how I try to go forward with stuff. And I really feel like FSW is, I'd put it up there with any show in any Fed. Like, I just, of course, that's my own personal pride talking.
Sure, of course.
But I put a lot into it, man. I pour a lot into that show. It's my baby.
What is your role as a general manager?
So obviously I'm responsible for booking the show. So I put together all the booking.
Okay.
I communicate daily with the roster. If they have storyline needs, wants, desires, whatever, I talk to them. I work that stuff out. I also score the role plays. We have a very extensive and detailed scorecard that we use that's based on a 25-point system. And so I score every role play that comes in for my brand, as it were. And then I also take part in scoring every title match that we do across the Fed, whether it be just on a regular episode of something or at a pay-per-view. Staff only, they're the only ones that score that.
Wow.
Which I think is actually really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, we want to be able to come to a consensus. Like, yeah, we all agree
this guy should be champion. Right, exactly.
Yeah. We all agree, and here's our justification, and our scorecards always have really good feedback about how you could have improved, what you could have done differently, our justification behind why we may have deducted a point here or there. And it may seem like tedious work, and sometimes it definitely could be, but I think that you have to have that to be fair. And if there's one thing in EWC that we are, and I will take this one to my grave, is, man, we're fair. We try to be as fair as we can to everybody involved, because first of all, it's a hobby. Like,
Yes.
you don't want to not be having fun, but second of all, like, it's just the right thing to do.
It's a creative hobby. You want to explore other people's creativeness as much as you want them to explore yours.
Absolutely.
And support each other. It's great. It's a great community effort. Especially with EWC, the number of handlers you guys have, the number of staff, it's really a special effort.
Yeah, so, just to dispel any rumors, our staff consists of 5 people.
Wow.
The 4 GMs, Mac, and that's it. Now, that being said, we have a lot of people that volunteer their time on top of role playing to help with scoring role plays, write matches, things like that.
Yep.
We don't do all the match writing and stuff ourselves. It would be like having our full-time job.
It would be each of you having your own EFED.
Well, and that's kind of how we run it, though, is each of us, each brand in EWC is its own mini Fed, right? Prime, for instance, is a micro Fed, right? It's 500 words or less. And it's the best of the indies. That's kind of how we brand it. Most of the episodes take place from various locations around the world because it is the quote unquote best of the indies. So, that's that micro Fed need. FSW is quote unquote developmental. It's 1,500 words or less, 1 RP per show. And I make the joke that it's the best show on Wednesday night, because, we're going up against AEW and NXT, and FSW is better. And then
and that's not your ego talking.
That's not my ego talking, no. But that's then we've got Brawl, which is the flagship show. It's the show that's been around since, to my knowledge, since the inception of EWC in '97. EWC is kind of like a one-stop shop, man. We offer something for everybody, and we try to cater to as wide of an audience as we can.
It's awesome because you guys do have 4 different shows. You have 4 different styles. You got 4 different staff members that are all, looking for something different. You got Mac, who is the catch-all. He's been running the Fed forever. He is so experienced. He knows how to handle situations. He handles drama like it's nothing. I've seen him just like walk out of situations unscathed, and it's terrific.
Yeah, no, he's an amazing dude.
He is.
I am supposed to report to you that he is great. I love working for him. He is sexy, and it angers me how sexy he is.
He is sexy.
Okay, now that I've pandered to Mac. Oh no, but yeah, no, that was it's been great working for him, getting to know him, dude. He's an amazing guy.
He is. Special shout out to Mac. He has supported the show, the EFED podcast, from almost day 1, and it's been fantastic. Really appreciate the working relationship we've had together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I hope it continues, man. But yeah, Mac's been, this is, to my knowledge, and I'm going to say to my knowledge, I believe EWC is the oldest active EFED in the game right now. I don't know that there's one that's older.
I don't know of one either.
97 goes back to my freshman year of high school. So
it's deep.
It's deep. That's deep. And like I said, I'm in my 30s. So
it's awesome.
Coming up on my 20-year reunion, not my 10. But yeah, no, I mean, 97, like, holy crap, like to still be in the game and still be as passionate as he is. And the cool thing is the more you get to know Mac and the more that, you show him what you're capable of, the more he lets you just do your thing. And that's what I love about it. Like at work, I'm a manager at work. So like, I know all about managing people, and I know what I would want my boss to treat me like. And that's kind of what Mac does, man. He treats you like an equal. And, it's like, hey man, like you do you, here's my thoughts, right? Yeah. It's always like, it's your show, it's your final call. Here's my thoughts. And I love that. I will say without a shadow of a doubt, the 5 of us together, when we all get together and we can all sit down real time and talk about some stuff, like we can come up with some amazing stuff. And I think that some stuff that we have planned, for later this year that I think people are going to love. And it's all because our minds just kind of meld so well together. Myself and Alex, who is the Brawl general manager now, Darren, who is the Rampage general manager, and then Prime, who remains to be, likes to just be referred to as Prime. She doesn't like to let us know her first name, and that's fine. It's whatever. But yeah, the five of us, when we get together and talk things out, we're unstoppable. We absolutely are. And we've done some stuff this season already that I never thought I would see in an EFED.
It's great stuff. And EWC's always got new ideas, new initiatives, innovation, the 4-day WrestleFest, the Strangle. I mean, it's always cool watching the Twitter profiles. The handlers are very active. It's good stuff.
Absolutely.
And you guys can get in at EWC4life.com.
See, now you got the show. You got the show right. I appreciate that.
See? Yeah, and you guys can check him out at Stranglemania on Twitter. And I'm not positive what Mac's personal Twitter is, but
he has one. It's
EWC Mac or something like that.
I think something like that.
You can find him.
But yeah, you can find it if you go to @Stranglemania. You'll find
there
it.
You
trust
go.
me. You can also find the individual Twitters for us as the individual shows as well, because there's @EWCMNB for Brawl, @EWCFNR for Rampage, and so on and so forth.
There you have it. EWC is always looking for new people, always looking for new role players, and they've got something for everybody. So get in where you fit in.
Absolutely. I will say right now we are definitely looking for more people for our Prime brand, which, like I talked about, Best of the Indies. So if you want to get in a micro fed, have a very easy promo, 500 words or less, not a lot of fluff, right? And so you get right to the point, old school kind of NWA promo feel to it, right? We're also looking for more people for Rampage, Friday Night Rampage, which is one of our flagship shows, no word limit RPs, on a really awesome show. And Darren is a fantastic general manager. He loves to tell great stories.
That's awesome. I might have to get in on that micro fed.
Yeah, for sure, man. I never thought that it would appeal, but honestly, a few times I've been tempted.
I've been tempted.
I've been like,
I have too.
Can I do it in 500 words or less and do it effectively?
I've got some shit. But man,
there's some. I tell you, there is some competition on that show. The guy who used to be our undisputed champion, Dominic Sanders, he actually, after he lost the belt, went to Prime.
Wow.
He went from an unlimited role play
to a micro.
Words to a micro fed. And he worked his way through it. He was the indie champion for a very long time, up until, what was it, last Sunday, I think, or the Sunday before, maybe.
Well, not as you're hearing this.
Yeah, not as you're hearing this, but it was as the time of recording. It was. But we had our Prime exclusive pay-per-view, which was called Worldwide, and he unsuccessfully defended the Indie Championship against the guy who held it before him and the guy he won it off of, who was Jordan Sharp, in a Crazy Train match, which started in the pay-per-view was set in Glasgow, so they started somewhere in London on a train and took a train from London to Glasgow and fought the entire pay-per-view on that train.
Say you can't do it straight. You have to do it intermittently.
And it's funny because Tony, the guy who handles Dominic Sanders, wrote
Tony.
Yeah, shout out to Tony. So he went back and forth. He was like, should I do it all in one shot? Should I break it up? And so he actually ended up doing a poll, I think, on our boards. And we were just like, yeah, break it up and do it that way. And it was phenomenal. It was a great mix of serious fighting, some comedy, some good cameos from people, alt characters or retired characters and stuff like that. But it was a great match. It was a fantastic match.
And probably some geography too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's funny is that match kind of came about almost in a response to a match I did the month before. So I had the FSW exclusive pay-per-view called Uprising the month before. So my main event was what I dubbed a Carnival Carnage match, which was a match set in a carnival. So the FSW champion Stitches the Clown, his backstory is that he came from a carnival, right? So we had this whole thing set up where they would fight through the various parts of a carnival, almost like the Firefly Funhouse match at WrestleMania.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
So it was. I wanted to build it as this really silly, campy, cinematic wrestling match. And so I pitched the idea to Stitches and Candy, the opponent in the match, and I said, "What do you think?" And Stitches immediately goes, "Yeah, I dig it. Like, I'll write it." I was like, "Okay, like, sure, great, man, thank you, I appreciate it." And he turned in one of the most solid start to finish matches I've ever read in my entire career, hands down.
Wow.
It was phenomenal, and it had drama, and it had all the right, like, because these two characters had a history that went back 2 years. They have fought so many times, and up until WrestleFest in December, Stitches had never beaten Candy. So they went back and told the entire story from start to finish of Candy and Stitches and how it all laid out. And in the end, we had a new FSW champion in Candy. So she is the second person to come from Prime, where she was an indie champion, make the jump to FSW and become FSW champion. The first one to do it was Stitches. So, and then in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have FSW 100, the 100th episode of FSW, and we're going to try to go I don't know if we're going to try, but there's an attempt to go 3 for 3 there, because another person who was indie champion on Prime and came to FSW, Killjoy Ito, is going to challenge Candy for the FSW title in Japan, where his hometown is.
Great handler.
At FSW 100. Yeah, Killjoy. Frank is his name. I don't know if he wants that outed or not, but Frank is an awesome guy. He is the handler behind Tommy Love and the Love family.
Great follow on Twitter.
Absolutely. Yes, follow him on Twitter, please.
At Memphis Tommy, I think.
You will not. Yeah, at Memphis Tommy, you will not regret it.
It's so good.
He's so good. That's all I'm going to say.
So good.
But yeah. So, and those two characters, Candy and Killjoy, have a big history. It just kind of lined up, like the stars lined up on these matches, because the people won that allowed it to tell the most amazing story, between it. So we'll see how that works out. But yeah, it's, so the Crazy Train match kind of came about a little bit. I'm not going to say all, because I think Tony and Jordan Sharp were talking about this before, but kind of from the Carnival Carnage match, which kind of came about to me from the Firefly Funhouse match and the Boneyard match that were done at WrestleMania. So it's kind of funny how art imitates life in that standpoint.
Absolutely. Well, that's awesome. Is there anything else you want to cover on the EWC side before we get to the question side?
Oh God, yes. Yeah, no, absolutely no. But we have a home stretch of events coming up. We have Hardcore Revolution is the Monday Night Brawl exclusive pay-per-view coming up in June. It's going to be live on pay-per-view. Main event there is our undisputed champion Scorpio, who won the title at Stranglemania this year from Melody Malone. He is going to be defending against Darius, who beat him a couple weeks ago in a non-title match setup. So he earned the right to challenge for that title. It's going to be a tables, ladders, and chairs match in the main event. We're going to be crowning a new international champion that night as well. We have a 3-way triple threat set up to crown a new international champion. In July, we're going to have Scars and Stripes, which is the Friday Night Rampage exclusive pay-per-view. I'm not going to spoil anything there because there's some matches that have not been announced yet. But that should be pretty cool. Then we have in August, I believe, we have Parabellum. It's either in August or at the end of July. We have Parabellum, which is going to be in Thailand. Parabellum is going to replace what we used to call Stable Wars, which is kind of like a War Games almost type theme. Only I believe this year, and if I'm wrong, Mac, I apologize if you can beat me later for it. I believe we're going to do Brand Warfare instead. So it's going to be, fight for brand supremacy against the four brands.
There you go.
And then we have Night of Champions coming up as well, which is always a big one. So Night of Champions is truly a Night of Champions. The main event is every champion in the Fed goes at it for the Undisputed Championship. So the winner walks out. The person who walks out is truly the best in the Fed.
So in order just to get a shot, you already have to be a champion.
You have to be a champion.
That's awesome.
Last year, Cyrus Black won the Undisputed title in that match. Traditionally, it has been defended and done in what we called an Insanity Cage, which was a 3-tiered cage match where you had to work your way up to the top and then toss an opponent off the top into a flaming table
of course,
to win.
Easily.
So we are gonna, and I believe Mac talked about this, maybe even when he was on, is we're actually going to change that up this year. It's no longer going to be the Insanity Cage this year. We're actually involving a new match format. May or may not have been done in other feds out there. I don't know. But basically the format's going to be this. We have 8 champions. So we're going to start with 2 teams of 4. We're going to have a 4v4 tag match. The winning team moves on. The losing team is automatically eliminated.
Okay.
Those remaining 4 people get split up into 2 one-on-one matches. The 2 winners move on. The 2 losers automatically eliminated. And then the final match will be 1v1 for the undisputed title.
Wow, that's a hell of a tournament style.
It's hell of a tournament style, and we're finalizing details on how that's all going to work out, because traditionally in the Insanity Cage it was a 3 RP limit. So you would do not even limit, it's 3 RP, like 3 mandatory RPs. One was a 500 word limit, one was a 1500, and one was an unlimited. It truly represented
you have to get all styles. Yes.
Yeah, you've got to get all styles. Candy, who was the current FSW champion, won the Insanity Cage 2 years ago. Last year it was Cyrus Black. So you really have to be able to go the gauntlet and whatnot. But yeah, so that's. I don't think we've settled on the final name for this match type yet, but it's going to be at our Night of Champions pay-per-view. So you could know after the first match that we're going to have a new undisputed champion if that team gets eliminated.
Well, good. Watch for that match to be stolen all over Efeding. But you heard it here first.
Yeah, absolutely. Copyright 2020 EWC.
That's right.
But yeah, so we have Night of Champions coming up. And then, of course, we have WrestleFest 2020, which we're still in the planning stages of too. But there's, the home stretch of events. It always heats up, man, as we go into August, September, October, and even a little bit in November. So like I said, I think if you're looking for a time to get into EWC, now's the time. We have plenty of room on our Prime brand, plenty of room in FNR. If you don't feel comfortable there, you can always join any of the rosters, though. I'm not going to say no to padding my numbers against Brawl. But yeah, it's just we have so much coming up as well backstage. We've been trying all season to get together and start EWC Backstage, which is our staff podcast that we're going to be doing. So Mac will be sitting down with all of us, and we'll be kind of shooting the shit, talking shop, and going through like our logic, like why we did some of the things we did and made some of the decisions we made.
That's awesome.
Which I think will be pretty cool. We had some plans to get it started right around March, and then we all know what happened right then.
Yes.
COVID happened. So we're still trying to get through that.
I think I actually interviewed Mac, and during his interview, he mentioned the same thing.
Yeah, he did, and we were really trying to get that going. But it happens.
No, absolutely. The whole situation really screwed everybody up.
It did. And I think that we also have already started making some plans for next season that I'm not going to spoil. But we have so many things planned, man. We have so many things planned. We have so much ambition, which is why this group works so well, because we all have the ambition, we all have the drive, we all have the desire to take this established thing that's been around since '97 and take it to heights it's never seen before.
It's awesome. And it's a great Fed with a great group of people. We've had a great working relationship, and I couldn't be happier to promote EWC. All right, let's move on to the question side of the podcast.
Oh boy, here we go.
First question's from our OG Judge Megan. High rank. That's what she's trying to get over. It is over. It's over as shit. Where did the idea of Stranglemania come from? And I'm maybe thinking she means WrestleFest.
No, because Stranglemania is kind of our WrestleMania.
Is it? Okay, very good.
Yeah, Stranglemania is the name of our May event. So it was kind of like our WrestleMania. I actually did ask Mac about this when I saw this question come through in the Discord. Okay. So he actually got the idea off of a 1995 ICP video. Stranglemania was something that they did when they first started producing their own wrestling
When they
shows.
started doing wrestling,
when Mac was looking for an ultraviolet gimmick-heavy WrestleMania type card name, and that's where he pulled it from.
Stranglemania, there you go.
ICP, please don't sue us.
C&D coming next week. What do you think of the current state of the hobby?
When I got back into it, like finding a Fed like EWC that has been around as long as it has. I was shocked.
You were very lucky to
didn't
do
think-
that.
Yeah, I was very lucky because I never would have thought I would have found a Fed that's been around this long.
No.
But knowing some of the other Feds that are out there, it was like HPW and Oath and Valor Pro for a while, and these are just names I've seen on Twitter because I'll be honest, I don't necessarily
Venture outside.
look out
Yeah.
for other Fed stuff outside of the EWC because I'm so busy with EWC. But I do know that a lot of our handlers have other Feds that they're in, which I think is awesome. But yeah, there's so many others that are out there that I know have strong histories too and have been around 5, maybe 10 years. But we're in season 21 right now
Insane.
in EWC.
Yeah.
That is insane. So, but yeah, I think the state of e-fedding as a text-based Fed is great. I think that there's also video Feds out there.
Yep.
If you look around the Facebooks, there are video Feds out there that do stuff like that. There's 2K sim Feds.
Yes.
There's all. I mean, God, you could anything that you could think of.
The hobby has
that would all
expanded
be a
so
cool
much.
Yeah, it would be a cool idea to run a Fed like this. I'm sure it exists. So it's. I think that's awesome that the hobby has sustained. It's gone through so many different iterations. I mean, I can remember when you found Feds via Rough Cut.
Yes.
Rough Cut was the big deal back in the day, and hey, shout out to him, dude. He was a pioneer.
Rough Cut, chat rooms. The MSN
yeah.
boards. I mean, however you found Feds.
However you found Feds, it was there, man, and we've survived as a hobby.
It's incredible.
And I think that's great. And I would love to see the hobby go even further. I would love to see the hobby get more recognition for what it is, right? It is some of the most creative and passionate writers I've ever seen.
Telling you amazing stories.
Yeah, you could theoretically...
And talking great shit.
Yeah, talking great shit. You could theoretically not be a wrestling fan and be a fucking world champion in an EFED.
Absolutely, if you're a great writer.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's and when you think about it that way, it's one of those moments where it almost blows your mind. You're like, holy shit, like yeah, that could happen. But yeah, it's absolutely. I think it's amazing, and I think that I'm not going to say that fan fiction came from e-fedding because it's been around long before e-fedding, but I think fan fiction has become more popular, and e-fedding has become more popular because of it.
Absolutely, I don't think you're wrong in that case at all.
They kind of go hand in hand there. So I think the current state is good, strong. The state of our union is strong in e-fedding. And I'm glad to still be along for the ride.
There you have it. Our next question is from @Rick. Are you ready for these ones?
Oh boy, here we go.
Question 1: Is your mom hot?
I'm not answering that.
Question 2: Is she single?
Yes.
Okay, there you go, Rick. Question 3: If you had to be interviewed by any backstage interviewer from any of the major promotions of any time in history, who would it be?
If it's got to be strictly a backstage interviewer, if you say anybody other than Mean Gene Okerlund, you're wrong. Everybody wanted to be interviewed by Mean Gene Okerlund.
Fuck it, we'll do it
Full
live.
stop. Yeah. Yeah, Mean Gene.
Okay, good solid answer. Question 4: Who would your manager be if you were a wrestler?
Oh,
Besides
be?
Memphis Tommy.
Yeah, besides Memphis Tommy. No, I mean, some of the best managers of all time were guys like Jim Cornette.
Yep.
Jimmy Hart. There was a lot of them. I would say one of the best managers, though, for the time period, for the situation, because of his contributions elsewhere, it's got to be Paul Heyman. And that would be my choice.
There you go.
I'm a Paul Heyman guy.
He's your advocate.
Yeah.
Up next, Imagine My Venom, the queen of EWC. What would your number one piece of advice be for people creating new characters and starting fresh in a new EFED?
That is a fantastic question, and not just because it came from Melody. No, that's a fantastic question, man. Like I said, I am in charge of the quote-unquote development brand of EWC, and I think that the one thing that I wish I would see more of is really take the time to think about your character. obviously we have an application that we want you to fill out, and it's extensive, for a reason, right? Like, we want you to really think about your character. We don't want just another generic heel or another generic face. Like, we want a really fleshed out rather, thought about persona, because the more you think about it and the more time you invest, the better that persona is going to be. So sit down and think about it. Really think about that backstory. Really think about, why is this moveset the moveset I'm going with? What does that mean? What is that telling me about my character? Because when you do that and you mix it with a great backstory, even if you're not successful right out of the gate, long term, I would bet dollars to donuts that you're going to be very successful.
It's a very well-rounded character.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great answer. Good question, too.
Yeah.
At Ruth Ann EWC or HEWC, if you can book truly any match between two people on the roster from today or people from past roster, who would it be in this match? And also, what kind of storyline are you hoping would come from it?
Man, and coming from a legend herself who just got inducted into the EWC Hall of Fame, I'll be honest, I've been so busy moving forward with FSW that I will admit that I haven't had a chance to really read all of the history of EWC. I will tell you names that come around constantly, though, are names like Explode.
Yes.
Ashton Drake, people like that. I think that if I were to be able to take two people who I think are just amazing writers, pit them together from what I know. Obviously, I think, the safe bet is always Drake. I think Drake was an amazing writer. I've gone back and read some of his stuff, and I thought it was fantastic. And I'd book him against Dominic Sanders.
There you go. Tony.
So, Dominic Sanders is a character that gets more and more layered the more and more Tony writes about him. And he has a very unique ability to create and tell character development stories in his shoot, which is not easy.
I cannot imagine it is, yeah.
Yeah, so it's so that kind of laid up against the way that Drake did things, because Drake was very much an in-your-face writer, from what I could tell. I think that would be fantastic. It may have happened already. I don't know. I know Tony has been around longer than I have in EWC, so I don't know if it's happened or not. But I think that would be a great one. I think we saw a fantastic dream match not too long ago on Friday Night Rampage. Ace King and Luke Wolf, and Luke Wolf's last match, his retirement match, I thought was absolutely one of the ones for the ages. I also think we're about to see one coming up too. First time ever, and these guys have been in the Fed for a long time. Ace King is going to defend his X Division title against Stitches the Clown on an upcoming episode of Friday Night Rampage.
Big main event.
Which may have already aired by the time this goes out. I don't know. But yeah, that's just a dream match. It's the first time ever. They've been in this Fed together 2-3 years, and they've never fought. Their paths have never crossed. So I think that's going to be fantastic too.
That's awesome when you can have such depth of a roster that you can counter first time matchups that late in the game. Awesome. Up next is at Memphis Tommy.
Oh, good God.
If there is one wrestler you could steal away from Brawl, Rampage, or Prime to bring to FSW, who would it be?
Oh, man.
And by bring, I mean steal away full time, not one time appearance.
Yeah, I'd have to give you the answer of two, because there's two of them that I would take in a heartbeat. Number one, Bosa. Bosa's a Monday Night Brawl character, and he's just an amazing writer. He's got a similar kind of character to Anthony, my active wrestler when I was active in EWC. In fact, my last match was against him on Brawl, and he beat me because he's just a fantastic writer, and he's very young. He's so young, and he's going to get so good. So Bosa I would take, and I would take Jordan Sharp from Prime. I think he's an amazing writer, and when he gets on it and he gets that groove, man, he absolutely can hang with anybody.
It's cool that you have the brand awareness that you know the other brands well enough to pick out these people.
Oh yeah, because one of the things that I've made a goal of mine this year in FSW is to get some of these people to come to FSW, right? So I've had, in the last couple of weeks, I've been building up to FSW 100, and I have given both Killjoy Ito and Candy specific opponents, all coming from other brands, that have been meant to tune them up for their big collision at FSW 100. So I had our current undisputed champion face Candy 2 episodes ago. The episode that just aired last night of FSW, Ace King just fought Candy. I've had our United States champion Samantha Hamilton fight Killjoy Ito. From Prime, I had El Pablo fight Killjoy on last night's episode. So, and I haven't released the card yet for the next one, so I'm not going to spoil just yet who is going to face them next. But it's even bigger. I'm getting people that have never appeared on FSW, and I wanted to do that for a reason, which is because I want to intermingle as much as I can. We have this concept in EWC where we have we have 3 titles that are quad brand titles, which means anybody in the Fed can hold these titles. First one is the undisputed title. Second one is the X Division title, and the third one's the tag team titles. So I do my best to keep those divisions relevant on my show by bringing in people from other brands to mix with people from my brand.
Because you want the competition to always be top notch.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's good stuff. Follow-up question from Tommy: which is your favorite love, Tommy, Bobby, or Bunny?
I mean, I gotta go with his son, not Tommy, but
Bobby.
I gotta go with
Bunny.
No, it's Buddy, right? Is it Buddy Love?
He says Bobby or Bunny.
Bobby. I'm sorry, Bobby. It's got to be Bobby, only because I'm a huge Joel Gertner mark.
We had good old Joel Gertner on the show here a few weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, a little cameo spot. So up next, we got once again at Ruthann EWC, Ruthann HEWC. What are your favorite goals, if you can share, for FSW to become down the road?
I can tell you my immediate goal.
What's the immediate goal?
The immediate goal is for FSW to be named Brand of the Year this year. To my knowledge, it's never happened in EWC history. So my goal, I've been throwing shots at all the GMs all year long. That
this is it.
Orange is the new red, and orange is the new green. Those are the colors of Brawl and Rampage, and orange is the new blue. I just.
The follow-up question is, what other groundbreaking things are you going to do for it? So, yeah, keep on rolling with that.
Oh, yeah. Obviously, my immediate goal is that I want to be Brand of the Year. I want to earn Brand of the Year. I don't want to just be given it. I want to earn it. I want to be, I want to show that, I can do that, because, again, something like that is awesome in a Fed like EWC. As far as groundbreaking, I have some plans for next season that I'm starting to formulate. I think there's going to be a few changes to FSW as far as the way it's looked at and the way it's treated. I'm not going to change anything major like its name or anything like that. But I want to establish it more like NXT is currently, which is, yes, they're still developmental, but they are a legitimate third brand.
Yes, it is its own league. It's not a work your way up thing.
Right. So, I think that's something that I'm not really spoiling anything there, but that's something I definitely want to continue to work towards. Not too long ago, I got in a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about, they were asking about, like, they couldn't really tell the difference between the 4 shows in EWC. And, I kind of laid it down, like, there is a difference if you really look at the details. But, FSW is, in my mind, a hybrid of NXT and AEW.
Why is that?
I take it that way, number one, because of the developmental feel to it. Obviously, that gives it an NXT feel, making it its own kind of third brand. But I take from AEW, contendership stuff than maybe some of the other brands do. Obviously, they do for big stuff, but I really make sure that I'm always moving contenders up and down and along and doing rankings. I always am trying to name contenders for this belt or that belt, and really making that a part of the story. We only get 1 or 2 shows a month, so it's not like I have a weekly ability to do this, so I've really got to plan stuff and I got to build it up right. Not that I would want a weekly show, by the way, Mac. Please don't do that to me. I don't have to. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I think that I look at the way AEW is doing certain things, and I look at the way NXT is doing certain things, and I look at the way that EWC does certain things, because EWC has its own culture that I try to stick within too. So, and I also give some nods to old school ECW at the time. Like, one thing I do that no other show does is I brought back the 3-way dance.
Nice.
Which is an elimination style 3-way match. It's not one pinfall. That was one of my favorite match types from ECW. And I was like, screw it. Like, I'm taking it. I'm stealing it. It's mine now. But I try to layer little things from my own personal wrestling passions into it. And a lot of it's fed by the current product that I'm influenced by.
That's awesome. And it sounds like a great place. Regardless of what you're into in Efedding, there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
And FSW is on the way up. It's looking to not just be a future stars, but to be current stars as well. You guys can get in right now on the ground floor at EWC4life.com and at Stranglemania on Twitter.
Absolutely. And, it's, like I said, we're making plans for next season already. Season 22 is going to be even better than season 21. And we haven't even finished season 21 yet. You know what I mean? So we're always looking to go forward. We're always looking to do more. And a lot of that stems from the guy at the top. And, Mac pushes us to do better, be better every day, every week. And when we get that gel going and we get that stuff moving, like I said, we're unstoppable.
It really is. And EWC is a monster to be reckoned with. Check them out, guys, on Twitter and on the interwebs. They're a huge sponsor of the show. They are sponsoring our question of the week every week. EWC4life.com. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Before we go, is there anything else you want to cover? Anything else you want to put over?
No, I think I've pretty much done that. I just want to say thank you so much for having me, Mikey. I'll come back in a heartbeat if you ever want me. I've had a blast tonight, just kind of talking shop with you. You're doing a great thing for the community with this podcast. So thank you for that. EWC4life.com. You can also find me on Twitter if you want to reach out to me at Chris Brock EWC. Anyone who's looking for a new Fed, give us a try. That's all I'm going to say, man. Give us a try. We're going to do everything we can to be there for everybody that joins our roster.
There you have it. Great job, Chris. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a great night.
You too, man. Thank you.
That's going to wrap us up, guys, for another edition of the Efed podcast. I want to thank Chris so much for coming on and doing the interview and having us learn a little bit more about him and one of our favorite feds here on the Efed podcast, the EWC. Appreciate their support since day one-ish and being a sponsor here on the Efed podcast. I want to thank, of course, Defiance Wrestling, as always, for sponsoring the show. Check them out at defiancewrestling.com. One of the greatest angle feds out there and with one of the greatest world champions out there. I want to thank the Atomic Dropcast. That's my other podcast. Thanks, me, for sponsoring the show. Check out the Atomic Dropcast at atomicdropcast.com. We've got a lot of episodes. What it is 1997 wrestling. We go back and watch it with a few beers in hand and just enjoy the wrestling from our childhood as adults. Want to thank OCW Fed. You can check them out at ocwfed.com. One of YouTube's #1 2K feds out there. Non-sim. Thank you very much. OCW Fed. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time to listen to the show. Appreciate everyone answering the question of the week, giving us those interview questions, and much, much more. You guys are the backbones of the Efed podcast, and without you, we wouldn't have this little community. So shout out to each and every one of you. That's enough shilling for me this week, guys. I appreciate you listening to the Efed podcast. So for Brian, I'm Mikey. Thanks for listening, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real.
Free on Patreon.